Okay, hello everybody. Welcome to welcome to Anthropology. Welcome to Friday. I hope everyone had a good week. Did you have a good week? How'd the first week of the term go? It's a short week, I know, but sometimes the short ones feel long. I think because you expect them to feel short and then they don't. I don't know, but seeing as this is the first week, it's nice to get to Friday and maybe have a little bit of a break. Although I'm sure some of us have to. I'm sure some of us have to work on the weekend. But so just to give you a little heads up, so what we'll do today is we'll start. I guess officially what it is in the book is it's chapter 2, which is the nature of culture, and so we'll start talking about that today. Um, I think what I'll do is uh, I haven't quite decided yet. I think I'm going to try and figure it out on the weekend, depending on what our timing looks like. But I'll try to have our first quiz maybe not the first class that we're back in person, but the second one. So I'm thinking, don't quote me on this, but I'm just trying to give you as much notice as possible. So if we're back in person, if our first class is on the 25th, I'm thinking maybe on the 28th is when we'll have our first quiz. Okay, and I'll give you a little more. I'll give you a little more advance notice of that, but I just wanted to let you know that I'm thinking about it, and it'll happen pretty quickly once we're back in person because we'll already be almost 3 weeks into term, so we'll have to kind of get going on that. More to come on that later, but I just thought I'd mention it. The other thing I wanted to mention, or I wanted to ask for people in the live chat, who has figured out their textbook situation? So can you maybe let me know in the live chat if you have it, or if you are going to buy it at the school, or if you have a digital subscription, or if you're going to share with friends? Maybe just let me know if you've kind of figured that out, whether you've got the text or you've figured out your plan of how you're going to get it. Okay, just so I know people are kind of on top of that. Okay. So yeah, if you can answer that question for me in the live chat, that'll be great. I'll keep an eye on those responses. And also, as I'm kind of as we're going through today, and I'm talking to you, if you have questions or if you're confused about something, just pop it into the live chat, and I can answer it at some point. So don't hesitate to do that. So yeah, I see some people buying it at school, getting it online. As I say, it doesn't really matter to me what you do. Um, do what works best for you, whether it's a paper copy or whether it's online, whether you're reading at the library, whether you're sharing with friends. I'm I'm good either way. Just make sure that you have access to it and can read it. Okay. Okay. So maybe without further ado, let's. So when was it? Oh, it was on Tuesday, I guess. So Tuesday, just in case you missed class, we didn't really deal with too much. I gave kind of an overview of the course and what it would be like. And if you go into Moodle, of course, you can see the course syllabus. I mentioned that I'll post all of my lecture slides here that you see on the screen. I'll post them in Moodle as well. I'm going to figure out how to do that on the weekend. All of these videos, as you may notice, will be posted to YouTube, so you won't have to worry about that. Those are posted there if you want to go back and look. Yeah, so we went over kind of what the course looked like, so you can look at the syllabus. And we also talked a little bit about what anthropology was as a discipline, right? How we can think of this area of study. And again, I just realized that I don't have to say too much about it, because if you missed last class, you can just go back and watch the live stream from Tuesday. So you theoretically you can't really miss anything. Um, but anyway, let's carry on here. Again, if you have questions or comments, just shoot them into the live chat there, and I'll answer them as soon as I kind of see them. Okay. So one of the things we said last time is where we kind of defined what anthropology was, the study of human beings in all times and all places. So all the things that humans do, all the things that humans are, um, the things that we think, the things that we feel, the ways in which we behave, the ways in which our bodies work, um, all through time from the beginning of the human species till right now. Anthropologists are interested in that sort of thing. But we also said that that was a massive field of study, right? Humans are complicated creatures, right? I think we know that. And so we said that anthropology kind of separates itself into four different fields, right? Anthropologists who are focusing on our physical bodies or our evolutionary relationship to other primates, how we use our bodies, how we think about our bodies, how our bodies kind of operate, and when we die, how they decompose. All of that stuff is what physical or biological anthropologists are interested in. We said archaeologists were anthropologists who are looking at cultural behavior in the past, and so they often look to physical remains, right? The things that people leave behind, often garbage, but sometimes structures, sometimes fire pits, sometimes actual human bodies, right? We bury our dead and leave them behind. We said linguistic anthropologists are interested in language, right? How it kind of evolved, how it works, how it fits together, and how we use it to kind of communicate with each other and to transmit, pardon me, to transmit human culture. Right? And then finally, we said social or cultural or sociocultural anthropologists. They're interested in cultural behavior of humans who are alive, right? And so sociocultural anthropologists often visit the cultures that they're studying, they live with them, they learn the language, and they kind of try to describe and understand a culture from the inside out. Okay, so sociocultural anthropology is for cultures that you can actually go and visit or that you could go and visit. So that kind of brings us to what would be chapter 2 in the textbook, which is called The Nature of Culture. Um, and if I asked you, and I think I will ask you, um, if what is culture in your mind? Okay, so maybe just throw me some answers there in the live chat. Um, don't Google it and copy and paste it. I'm not looking for, I'm kind of interested in what you think. When somebody says culture, what do you think about? How would you define it to someone who's asking? Okay. So yeah, don't copy and paste, just tell me what comes to mind. Um, yeah, so Kamjot here says it's a way of living one's life, right? And that's quite general, but it is very true, right? It's a way of living life, sometimes called life ways. Sukhjinder says here, groups of people with some specific norms and lifestyle. Yeah, very, very true, right? Maybe we can talk a little bit about norms later, but that's true. Um, but Bharti, I'm probably mispronouncing your name and I really apologize. Says traditions, right? So things that we do kind of over and over, right? Things that we repeatedly do. Um, I think Rocio, I'm probably mispronouncing everyone's name. When we get into class, I'll figure out pronunciations and you can help me, I promise. A group of people who share the same values. Yeah, that's important too, right? People in a culture often give importance to the same things, right? Um,
Sahajpreet says, yeah, like tradition, very true, right? Things that we kind of do over and over and have done for a long period of time. Uh, Nandini says, yeah, sharing our common traditions, good. Uh, the way people live and interact with each other, yeah, that's an important thing too. Their lifestyle, yeah, their food for sure, their dress, their festivals and celebrations. It's good. Sabrina says something we're used to depending on and how we were raised. Yeah. Or something we're used to depending on how we're raised. Yeah, exactly. So that'll be another important part of talking about culture is our upbringing, right? Our growing up and being sort of taught by our parents. Kamjot says a group of people following the same ritual. Yeah, ritual is important as well. Um, Traditional rules followed by a particular group of people. Yes, very good. Um, Arshpreet says traditional values. Good. Uh, yeah, culture, the lifestyle developed by people who share a common geographic location. Yeah, that's also true, right? Cultures tend to appear in one place and be kind of developed by one group of people, although in a world like we live in, people spread out, and so their culture kind of travels with them. Um, yeah, religion is a piece of culture as well, right? Different different religions have different traditions and they have different values, right? And that's a piece of culture. Wow, look at all this stuff. You guys are awesome. Um, Beliefs which are not change, which remains the same, like the way our ancestors follow. Yeah. Um, Although I'll contradict you a little bit, Manjot, but we'll get to it later. But yeah, lots of pieces of culture do stay the same, right? They're kind of handed down from generation to generation. But some things do change as well. And I'm sure that if I asked you, all of you could think about parts of your own cultures that are different from the way people used to do them in the past, right? Some things stay the same, and some things change or adapt, right? Um, Representation of the values by a group of people, yes, very good. And customs of different places, yeah. So that's all really good. And those are all kind of constituent pieces of culture. And I think, we've kind of hit on a number of the important pieces, the beliefs, the values, the traditions, the norms, right? The things that people do over and over again, the things that people passed down, right, from one generation to another, from our ancestors all the way to present day. Yeah, that's exactly what culture is. And so, for our purposes here, I'll kind of sum it up in a definition like this. But as you can see, you guys have really hit a lot of the important things, right? We have beliefs, things people believe to be true, right? We have values, things that people feel are important, right? The things that people think are good and right. Customs, right? Things that we kind of do over and over again. Behaviors, norms can kind of fit into those two things as well. Customs, behaviors, norms, ways of behaving. Um, and artifacts, right? So an artifact is kind of a fancy anthropological term, but really anything is an artifact, any kind of physical object that humans use, right? So this would be an artifact. So maybe you can't see it, it's a pencil. That's an artifact. What else do I have here? Glasses. Glasses are an artifact. Phones are an artifact. A cup is an artifact, right? So any kind of physical object that belongs to a culture, that's kind of part of it as well, right? Um, and of course, the important part here, I've kind of bolded it, um, but it's the fact that these things are shared, right? That we, in a group of people, in a culture where people have culture in common, they tend to share all of these things, right? They have roughly the same beliefs. They have roughly the same values, right? Not always, not everyone is the same, right? We're not robots, we're not clones. We're all kind of individual thinkers, but with people in our culture, we kind of share a general outlook on the world, right? And we kind of think about things and do things in kind of somewhat similar ways, right? So that's good. We're doing well. Um, yeah, as you can see, our beliefs and our norms are related to all kinds of different pieces of culture, right? First of all, our language, right? Kind of the way that we describe the world and think about the world and divide the world up, that's all based on language, right? Our food procurement and consumption, right? If you think about it, all of our cultures have decided that, you know, we have certain norms and customs regarding food, right? Some food is acceptable and good to eat, and then some things are not food, right? There are things that you could eat, but our cultures say that no, those things are not food, right? For my culture, insects, right? We don't eat insects for the most part here in the West. That's gross. Our culture, our culture says that it's gross. You could eat insects. They're actually a very sustainable source of protein, but yeah, but our culture has kind of defined certain things as food, certain things as not food, and certain ways of preparing those things as well, right? And your culture has the same thing. Uh, Methods of exchange. How do we get the things that we need in society? Do we barter? Do we trade? Do we share? Do we buy things with money or debit cards? That's exchange, right? Gender and marriage, kinship, right? Who is in our family and who is outside. We share beliefs about art and music and dance. Um, what kind of things are pleasing? What kind of things are beautiful? What kind of things are not pleasing and not beautiful? Religion and ritual, of course, is part of culture. And so we may talk about that a little later in regard with what religion is for, right? What purpose it serves for a culture. We'll talk about that a little later, maybe. And of course, technology, right? Every culture has its own technology that it's developed in order to do the things that those people need to do. The other thing we should point out here is that culture is not just a bunch of beliefs, right? It's not just a bunch of things that we think and do, but it actually acts as a tool, right? It acts as a tool for us to interact with our physical environment, the places which we live, and also interact with each other, right? Um, but we should also remember it's a flexible thing, it's a changing thing, and it can adapt to different circumstances, right? If people's circumstances change, if their environmental circumstances change, or if their social circumstances change, so too can and will their culture. Um, and you know, you may know this already, or you may have a sense of it, but often it's the younger people that bring that cultural change, right? Young people tend to be the ones with new ideas, new ways of doing things. And often young people are the ones who are kind of pushing a culture forward, right? Whereas old people are kind of trying to pull it back. And again, you probably have a bit of a sense of that. Now, yeah, I already put it on the screen, so I'll leave it up there. Why do anthropologists study culture? Well, this is an important thing. Culture is a critical part of understanding what a human being is. And the reason that is because if you've ever seen a newborn baby, really small baby, maybe a few days old or a week old or even a month old, um, you probably intuitively realize that of course that little human being doesn't really know how to do anything, right? It's us humans are born with very little in terms of programming. And the way I like to think about this is I kind of like to think about humans as computers in this way. So I'm going to make kind of a metaphorical, um, uh, no, Marco, not quite, but watch where I'm going with this. Um, So I like to think about humans as computers, right? And so if you think about your laptop or your desktop, whatever you happen to be using right now, or even your phone, for instance, um, you'll note that whatever you're using to tune into this lecture, that piece of hardware, that computer, that phone, whatever it is, it has an operating system, right? So if you, depending on what you have, you might have Mac OS X or OS 10, you might have Windows, you might have Android, you might have iOS if you have an iPhone. Um, and if you think about it, the comparison here is that when humans are born, we have a physical body and a brain, right? We have the hardware, but we don't really have much in the way of software. We don't have an operating system. And of course, that's what the operating system is there to do for your computer, right? It teaches your computer how to do things. And some of you, maybe not many of you, but if you've ever seen a phone or a computer or a laptop or an iPad or whatever, if you've ever seen one of these things without an operating system installed, you'll pretty quickly discover that it's not very useful. It doesn't, a computer with no operating system doesn't really do anything because it doesn't really know how to. And that's what the operating system is, right? It teaches your computer how to do things, right? How to go on the internet, how to open email, how to pull up a Microsoft Word document, right? How to connect to a live stream. All of that is kind of built into the operating system and it teaches the computer how to do that. Similarly, with humans, we are born without an operating system. We don't really know how to do anything at all, right? We need our operating system to be downloaded into us, right? We need to be taught how to do things. And that's really what culture is, right? Culture is the operating system for humans, right? And of course, I mentioned a few computer operating systems, but there's far more human cultural operating systems, right? There's lots of cultures throughout the world. There's cultures that existed in the past that don't exist anymore. So humans have had all kinds of different versions of operating systems that have helped them to kind of achieve what they need to achieve, right? It's helped them to interact with the natural environment, right? To get the things we need from the environment and to protect ourselves from the more dangerous parts of the environment. And it teaches us how to communicate and interact with each other, right? So our operating system that we download, and we'll get to that in a second, the operating system that we download contains all of those things that you suggested to me, right? Our beliefs, right? The things that we believe to be true, our values, the things that are right and good and important, right? Our customs, the things that we do, how we interact with each other, how we deal with food, how we think about the universe, right? All of those things are kind of downloaded into us, just like we download an operating system into the computer. And so, for that reason, because we're born with really nothing, with no programming at all, and because we're taught basically everything that we know how to do is learned, that means that basically everything human beings do is a cultural act. Or if it's not a cultural act, it's done in a cultural way. Okay. So, me, like probably most of you, got up this morning, probably went into the bathroom at some point and brushed your teeth, right? And I did that. I got up this morning, I brushed my teeth. And why did I do that? Well, because my culture tells me to, right? My culture has told me that if I do not brush my teeth and take care of them, that they will rot and fall out of my head, and it will be very, very painful and uncomfortable and difficult to eat food after that, right? My culture also tells me that if I don't brush my teeth, my breath will be really bad, right? And then people might not want to talk to me or get anywhere near me, right? So even the simple act of brushing your teeth in the morning something that most of us probably don't think too much about, even that is a cultural act, right? So almost everything we do is either a cultural act or it's done in a cultural way, right? And that means that to be a living human, which I know we all are, is to be a practitioner of culture, right? Even if we're not doing what we might think of as cultural things, right? Maybe we're not doing a certain ritual, or it's not a certain celebration, or we're not, you know, we're not wearing our sort of traditional cultural clothing. Even if it doesn't feel like we're being cultural at the moment, we are, right? We're acting out our culture as we've learned it, right? Everything we do is cultural or done in a culturally specific way. To be a living human is to be a practitioner of culture, right? And that's why, there we go. And that's why that's why the concept of culture is so important for anthropology itself. Because if you're an anthropologist and you're studying human beings and you want to understand what humans are and what does it mean to be a human being, if you're trying to do that and you don't understand how culture works, well, then you don't understand anything, right? You can't understand anything about humans until you understand how culture works, because we are so dependent on it. It is so important to the way we go about our lives, right? Everything we do and think and feel has some connection to our culture, right? So, yeah, it's an important thing to understand. Now, I have a question for you here, and you can, I said discussion here, but really what we'll do is put things into the live chat. Um, the question is, why do we have culture at all? So, why do you think a group of people would choose to adopt a common set of beliefs and values and customs? Why can't why can't just everybody believe what they want? Right? Why can't everyone have different values, right? Why is it useful for everyone to be the same or to kind of think about things the same? And again, I'm not talking about identically. We're all a little bit different, of course, but why would why would people want to adopt the same set of values and beliefs? So I'll give you a minute or so, maybe throw some of your ideas into the live chat, and then we can talk about those things, okay? I'm curious to see what you say. And I'll just have a sip of tea. My voice is kind of getting more accustomed to speaking, so by next week I should be okay. But yeah, let me hear what you have to say. Why do you think a group of people, why would it be beneficial for them to have similar values, similar beliefs, um, similar customs, similar rituals? Why might that be? So I see some stuff coming up here. I'll just give it a few more seconds and then maybe I'll have a look. Okay, so let's have a look here. See what we have. So Sahajpreet says, or oops, nope, sorry. There we go. Sahajpreet says to show different identities of their group. Yeah, that is a that is kind of an important aspect of culture, right? Is kind of, I think what you're talking about, Sahajpreet, is identity, right? So part of the way we think about ourselves, um, has to do with our kind of personal characteristics. Are we funny? Are we smart? Are we good looking? Are we, you know, fun loving or serious or whatever we are? Part of that identity is our culture, right? That's part of what makes us who we are. And so we kind of think about ourselves or express ourselves in part by identifying with our culture, right? That's a big part of our identity. That's a big part of who we are. Um, yeah, so that's important. Marco says here to fit in and socialize since human beings are socially dependent. It's very true, right? As humans, we rely on each other, right? We need to cooperate with each other. And so, um, to some degree, it's important to be accepted by others around you and to fit in, right? Nandini says, culture helps maintain our original meaning and values given by the ancestors. Yeah, so yeah, there is a benefit to doing things the way of people in the past, right? Because people in the past figured it out, right? They figured out how to live in a certain environment. They learned how to cooperate. And so if we kind of maintain that, we, can maintain a successful way to live, right? To thrive. And so if we can practice culture as it's taught to us, we preserve those original ideas, but we also preserve a way of life that works, right? That is successful. And again, that's important for humans as well, right? It's important for us to be successful, especially thousands of years ago before civilization, right? We were trying to survive. Maya says, maybe because people need to hold on to something in order to have discipline. Yeah, that's that's an important function of culture as well, right? Our, our norms and beliefs and values and customs, they kind of maintain a social order, don't they? They try to ensure that people follow the rules, right? Because I don't think any one of us wants to live in a world with no rules, right? I like the fact that, I can walk down the street and pretty much everyone around me feels it would be wrong to kill me, right? I'm I'm happy that we share that value, right? I wouldn't want to walk down the street where I couldn't be sure if people wanted to kill me or not, or if they thought it would be okay. So that's an extreme example, I know, but again, people need some sort of structure in order to cooperate in and to have some kind of discipline, right? Or have some kind of rules of acceptability. Yeah, so that's good, Maya. Sukhjinder says, being a social animal, it makes a flow for life. Yeah, and I think I'm not entirely sure what you mean by flow for life, Sukhjinder, but I'm imagining that it means like, it gives you kind of a rhythm, a way to go about doing things, right? It's a structure, right? It's a framework for doing things. Um, Nandini says to make a difference in society, which I'm not entirely sure what you mean by that. I have a feeling you're on the right track, but I'm just not sure what that means. If you want to clarify for me, that'd be okay. Um, Gurpreet here says, because we're social animals, in order to interact with each other, it's important to have some similar beliefs and values. Yeah, right? Cooperation is much easier when you're kind of on the same page as the other person, right? When you have similar beliefs and values, you think the same things are important, right? Um, Bharti says to be disciplined and look similar and different from another group of people. Yeah, so there's that discipline idea that we talked about with Maya's comment, but also the idea of identity, right? Which I think was which was Sahajpreet's comment, right? The idea that um, part of who we are is our culture, and our culture distinguishes us from other people, right? We are this culture, and we're different from that culture over there, right? Those guys are different. We're this, right? This is our identity. And again, that's important too, because as we kind of cooperate with other humans, that group identity is important. It's important for us to know who is in our group, right? Who we cooperate with, and maybe who is outside, right? Who's outside our group. Um, let's see. Navneet says, as everyone is independent, they have faith in their religion. Okay, so yeah, that's an important point too, Navneet. The idea that religion can be something that unites people, um, unites people together, right? And similar to, I think it was Maya's comment, the idea of discipline, right? Religion is an excellent source of values and beliefs and teaching people good and bad and right and wrong. So yeah, religion has a really important role to play in culture for sure. Um, Arshpreet here says it acts as a link. It does, but I'm not sure what it's linking, but you can explain that to me if you like. Uh, but true. Culture helps people understand their values and rules. Yeah, it does. It explains why, not only what we do and why we think certain things are important, but also, well, yeah, it's not the what, but it's the why, right? It explains why certain things are desirable. Sabrina says here to fit into social norms. Yeah, so indeed, we do have normal behavior um, in a society, and culture teaches us how to fit into that, right? How to kind of do what everyone else is doing. Wow, you guys have so many comments. Okay, let's see. Show people their identity. That's good. Sorry, I'm going to go through them a little bit more quickly because you guys have been very helpful in providing a lot of feedback here, but I'm just going to try and go through it a little bit more quickly. So people follow good paths and have the same beliefs as ancestors. Yep, that's good, right? That teaches us kind of the correct things to do and the things that are important, right? Respect for the ancestors between us. Oh, between us and our ancestors. Yes. Okay. So culture links us, connects us to the past. Very good. Um, Navneet says us. Oh, okay, from before. So there will be no. Right. So yeah, culture is hopefully culture is a unifying factor, right? It holds and bonds people together. Yeah, very true. And hopefully, um, creates a connection between people who are similar but also who are different within society, right? And of course, caste can be is one way that people can share a culture, but they can also be separate, right? They can be different in some ways. Shows identity and creates a link. That's good. Uh, every culture has its own values and beliefs, and we can identify a person because of their culture. Yeah, that's good. Culture is a part of our identity. Very good. Aryan says culture is important because it represents a part of our personality and qualities and lifestyle. Yes, very true. That's good. Uh, for proper and easy functioning of the society, Manjot. And I think that comes from an earlier comment from you, right? Where are you now? Oh, maybe not. Maybe not. Okay, that's all right. Um, yeah, so the proper, yeah, and that's kind of where actually I'm going to press pause on you because I'm gonna address this in a second here, Manjot. So just hang on. Yeah, maintaining easy functioning and decorum, right? Does all of those things. So this is all really good. Um, and again, the question was, why do we have culture? Why would a group of people choose to adopt a common set of beliefs and values and so on? And all of what you said was excellent, right? It is, and you're all correct. Culture is part of our identity. It does give us rules and values that connect us to the past. It does allow us to have a common set of kind of behaviors in order to interact with one another, right? And all of those are right. And I was going to say, I think probably the most important thing, although again, all of what you said was correct, is is the cooperation thing, right? And so a number of people brought up the idea that human beings are we're social animals, right? We live in groups of other people, right? We're not off wandering through the mountains alone. Some of us are, but for the most part, we are in a society, right? Interacting with and cooperating with numbers of other people. And people who have similar ideas, similar beliefs and values and customs will be able to cooperate much more easily, right? They'll be able to trust each other. Um, and again, it's worth pointing out that cooperation is another thing that makes human beings really unique. Remember when I asked you on Tuesday, what is a human? What makes a human so different from all the other living things out there? And the way we cooperate is one of those things. I don't think it came up in our little brainstorming session, but it is one of those things that sets us apart. Um, if you think about it, humans don't just cooperate, but we cooperate in a flexible way and we cooperate in large numbers. And that's something that's really unique in the world of living things. Okay, so if you think about other living things, other animals, um, you might imagine, or you might think of something like a pack of wolves, right, or a pack of killer whales, right, that you might see in the ocean. And animals like that, they live in groups, they cooperate with each other, they have kind of a hierarchy, right? So with wolves, there's an alpha wolf, right? There's a head wolf who's kind of the boss, and then there's wolves that have kind of less stature and less power in the group. And the wolves kind of live together, they work together, they hunt animals, and they're very flexible in the way that they hunt those animals, right? They can come up with a plan, they can try to pursue the animal. If the plan's not working, they can adjust their plan and try something else. Their social structure is flexible, right? Sometimes the alpha wolf will be challenged by another strong wolf, and then they'll become the alpha wolf. So their social structure is flexible. The way that they kind of cooperate with each other is flexible. But what you find is that animals like this can't cooperate in large numbers, right? And the kind of short answer to this is that they kind of just don't have the brain structure and the memory to keep track of all this social information. And so what you find is that animals that cooperate in a flexible way tend to live in generally small groups, right? So wolves or killer whales, they'll kind of live together in groups of maybe 20 or so. But if the group gets too big, once the group gets too big, these animals have trouble kind of keeping track of the social hierarchy. They kind of forget who's on top and who's kind of in relation to who. And what tends to happen is the group will then split into two smaller ones because they're able to kind of interact flexibly in that size of group. The group can't get too big. If you think about other members of the animal kingdom, you'll see that there are some animals that cooperate really well in large numbers, right? So if you think of bees, for example, bees set up a hive, there might be hundreds or thousands of bees, and they cooperate, right? They build a hive, they raise young bees, they send workers out or drones, or I forget which one goes out and collects pollen to create honey. There's a queen bee who's in charge of the whole thing, right? Um, bees can cooperate in hundreds. Ants can cooperate in the thousands, right? But they are kind of limited in that they can't cooperate in a flexible way, right? So again, if you think of the beehive, there's always worker bees and drone bees and a queen bee, and they kind of always go about things the same way, right? The bees can never say, okay, this queen bee is, we really don't like her. Let's overthrow her. We'll have a bee democracy. We'll have bee elections, and we'll have a much more equitable representation in the hive, right? Bees don't know how to do that. They really only know how to cooperate in a particular fashion. Right? But again, human beings are different because they can do both of these things at the same time, right? They can cooperate in large numbers and they can be very flexible about it. And for an example of this, you really don't have to go any further than our college, right? Our college is a large group of people, right? There's about 2,000 students, give or take. There's about 200 staff members, instructors and office staff and counselors and all sorts of people. And we're all kind of working together, right? We're all kind of cooperating and doing our job in order to get what we need, right? I get a job and a paycheck and satisfaction from doing something I like. You get to get an education, get your associate degree, right? Move further in your educational journey or gain PR status or whatever you're trying to do. We're kind of cooperating to kind of get what we need. And we can do it in a flexible way, right? So we were going to do this class in person, but then shortly before we started, we changed and we switched online, right? And now we're doing this class in an entirely different way. And hopefully in another week or so, we'll be back in person having this class in a different way, right? So humans are very good at doing this. Large numbers of people can cooperate and cooperate in a flexible way. That's something that's unique to humans, but it's also a critical part of culture and how culture works, right? Because culture is what allows us to do that, right? A common set of beliefs and values is what allows us to trust each other, to cooperate, and to do so in a way that is always kind of adapting to the circumstances. Yeah. Um, and anthropologists have said this here. Clifford Geertz, he's an anthropologist from the 1960s and 70s. Um, and he says that, yeah, culture is a really important part of what humans are and how they operate, right? He says that if humans have culture, because they are compelled to impose meaning on things, right? We want to know what our experiences mean. We want to know why our environment is the way it is. And Geert says that imposing meaning on things allows us to make sense of our experience, to make sense of our lives. He says without culture, our universe would just be chaos, right? It would be a mess of, you know, pointless acts and exploding emotions. And, it was, who said it? I forget who said it. All sound and fury and signifying nothing, right? So humans try to impose meaning on their environment, meaning on their interactions in order to understand and organize their experience, right? Meaning gives us the ability to understand, right? And Geertz here has a very similar comment, right? A very similar idea to my computer operating system analogy. The idea that humans are incomplete or unfinished animals, and we complete ourselves through culture. Um, and this is a very true statement. I don't know, this is a bit of a tangent, but maybe I'll tell you about it anyway. This is a bit of a tangent, but I don't know if you've ever heard of feral children. Um, I'll just type it up so you can see what it looks like here. Yeah, if you've ever heard of feral children, um, feral children are children who have been uh, often they haven't been kind of raised by humans, and so the classic story is a very young child is lost in the woods. Maybe they're cared for by animals, or they somehow manage to survive, and then they're found later on, years later. Yeah, so children who are raised in the wild. If you know of The Jungle Book or the Netflix movie Mowgli that came out a couple of years ago or so. The Jungle Book or Mowgli is inspired by just such a situation. Mowgli is he's a feral child, and there have been real instances of these, not many, but a few. And the interesting thing with these children is that when they are found, often maybe around 10 or 12 years of age, when they're found, people kind of, bring them in from the wilderness. And, the first thing we do is we start to kind of socialize them, right? We give them clothes, we start to teach them language, we try to give them food, we try to kind of teach them how to act. And the really interesting thing is that, particularly with language, with human language, there is a real limit to what these children can learn. And so, you know, um, a child that is kind of found at 10 or 12 years of age, they'll be taught language, right? The language that they missed out learning from their earlier years. But most of them never really get better at language or writing or spelling or anything like that than maybe a 5-year old or a 6-year old. Their language skills are very, very limited. And of course, the reason why is that our our brain's ability to do those kinds of things, to encode and process and store language, those parts of the brain grow as we are taught language. So the interesting thing about these kids is that because they missed out on that, because they weren't taught language at that young age, their brain kind of didn't develop in that way, right? So it started growing neurons and it started wiring, and then there was no language that was communicated because the child was lost in the woods. And so the brain kind of shut that wiring down. The brain says, okay, I guess we're not doing that. And it shuts off that growth cycle. And that growth cycle doesn't occur at another time. You can't turn it back on. And so to say that, or sorry, before I go there, um, yeah, with feral children, there's a real limit to what they are able to do linguistically and in terms of their thinking and understanding. And the reason is because not only do humans need culture to survive, but we actually need culture to become who we are, right? Humans can't really become full humans, at least not in the way that we're used to understanding a human. We can't really become that unless we are taught language, unless we are taught culture, right? That teaching is actually what helps to develop our brain, right? So this is where my analogy doesn't really work because computers don't work that way. But imagine if, as you downloaded your operating system, your computer got smarter and faster, right? Imagine if, as you downloaded that operating system, the memory of your computer increased, right? And the speed of your processor that increased as well. Of course, it doesn't work that way. Computers just kind of are what they are, but humans are not, right? And so Geertz is really quite right to say that we are incomplete or unfinished animals that complete themselves through culture, because he's not only talking about the things that we know and the way that we behave, but actually the way that our brain works and the way that our brain is wired. And if we don't get that, if we don't get that culture kind of downloaded to us, then we really can't become human in the way that all of us are used to. And so, yeah, he's very correct in saying this, right? And culture is not just about the things that you know and the things that you understand and the beliefs that you have, but the downloading of that culture to you has actually changed the wiring of your brain. Your brain is wired in a particular way because you were taught culture, because you were taught language. And so it's very true. We do actually complete ourselves through culture. And again, that's something that no other animal really does. It's quite remarkable, actually. So let me see where I am here. Yeah, so us humans have the need to impose meaning on our experiences. And so to be a human is to be a practitioner of culture, but it's also to be a maker of meaning, right? We are creatures that give meaning to things, we signify things. Okay, so we've been going hard at this for about an hour. We've been working hard. I'd like to take a quick 10-minute break. I'm going to go heat up my tea here. And in 10 minutes, I'll meet you back here. We'll kind of continue on. I have some additional questions for you, but we'll get to that in about 10 minutes, okay? So take a break, come back in 10, and we'll start again, okay? See you in just a little bit.
Okay, people, and we are back. Hope you had a good break and got up to stretch your legs if possible. Um, yeah, so we've been talking about the kind of necessity for or what a culture is, the necessity for kind of sharing beliefs and values amongst people in a common culture, and even a little bit about what happens when culture is not present, right? And it's a little bit of a scary thing, actually, the idea that, if you are not taught culture, if you're not taught language, in fact, your brain doesn't really develop in the same way, and you actually, become, in some ways, maybe a little less human. Um, so yeah, so let me move on here because I have another question for you, and we've kind of established the idea that all cultures have similar beliefs and values and ideas about how the world works, right? Again, not identical, we're all individual people, but similar. And what I'd like to ask you is this. I think we could agree that no matter where you live in the world, no matter what culture you belong to, and maybe even what time period you belong to, all humans experience some of the same challenges and some of the same kind of occurrences, right? So, whatever culture you belong to, you have to experience and deal with the birth of new humans, right? You also have to deal with and experience the death of humans, right? All of us, no matter what culture we belong to, have to find food. We have to feed ourselves. We have to clothe ourselves. We have to protect ourselves from the environment. And again, maybe it's a hot environment, maybe it's a cold one, maybe it's a dry one, maybe it's a wet one. We still have to protect ourselves from the environment. We have to find water. We have to find shelter, right? There's all these kind of common experiences that transcend culture, that transcend where we come from. They are human experiences that we all have. But that said, when we look at different cultures, we see that each culture kind of has its own way of talking about these things. It has its own way of explaining these things. Every culture has different beliefs and different values, right? As an example, think about what happens, well, not think about, but think about the understanding of what happens when we die, right? And of course, we're not sure about this. Nobody has ever come back to tell us really, but every culture and every religion has a particular idea about what happens when someone dies. Is that it? Do they go to paradise? Do they go to a heaven, or do they go to somewhere warmer? Are they reincarnated? Are they reborn into another body, into another life, right? All of these different explanations. And my question to you, and what I'd like to hear your thoughts about in the live chat here, is this question here. So, if humans are motivated to impose meaning on our experience, and if we experience a lot of the same events like birth and death and so on, why do we have different explanations for why things happen? If all humans experience the death of other humans, why don't all cultures think about death or explain death the same way? That's my question to you. So maybe I'll just give you a minute. What do you think? Give me some thoughts. Put them in the live chat, and we can talk about them. I'd be curious to hear what you say. So I'll just give you a 30 seconds or a minute to pop some thoughts into the live chat, and then we can discuss them. So again, if we all experience similar life events that are kind of distinctly human? Why do different cultures explain those things different ways? Okay, I'll just wait a few more seconds here, and then I will then I'll address some of those comments there. Okay, so, all right, let's see what we have here. So Barty says, because nobody knows the truth, every group of people just have assumptions based on their beliefs and customs. Yeah, that's part of it, right? The idea that some of the things that we try to explain, we're just really not sure of, right? We don't know why and how the universe is the way it is, right? We don't know for sure what happens when people die, right? Certainly nowadays we understand how people are born, right? We understand sexual reproduction, right? Science has kind of informed us how that works. But for people hundreds or thousands of years ago, they were really only guessing, right? They were trying to figure out how that system worked. And so, yeah, part of one kind of variable in the equation of why things are different could have to do with the fact that these things are hard to know, right? And people in the past really wouldn't have known what happens how is it that people are born, or what happens when people die, or what the stars in the sky are, or why water falls from the sky, right? They wouldn't have understood that in a scientific way, and so they would have tried to come up with other explanations, right? So uncertainty is probably part of it. Garcia says different perspectives, right? So yeah, people do look at things differently for sure. Part of my question though is why? Why do people look at things differently? Okay. Marco says a lot of how humans view things is based on culture. Yeah, basically environment and lifestyle they followed and live in until that certain extent. Yeah, so that's an important point there, Marco, the idea of the environment, right? So one of the things about humans is that we are very adaptable. And because of that, we live in all kinds of different environments, right? We live in Arctic cold, we live in jungles, we live in deserts, we live in cold places and warm places and wet places and dry places. And the area of the world that your culture comes from is going to have an effect on how you see the world, right? Living in a desert is a much different experience than living in a tropical jungle, right? And so the things that you see in one environment versus the other is going to influence how you see the world and how you explain it, especially um, uh, especially like what Barty was saying, where you're trying to explain things that you really don't know for sure, right? You really can't explain 100%. So yeah, um, that's a good point on the environment. Akamjot says different beliefs. Yes. Um, I think I need a little more than that to comment on that one. And if you want to give me a little bit more, I can talk about it. But I'm not sure which direction you're going with that. Mandeep says because of different cultural beliefs. Yes, but my question is, where do those beliefs come from? And why are they different? Maya, different cultural beliefs. Okay. Because everyone has a different perception of perceiving the same things. Yeah, okay, that is true. Their own perspective and beliefs. Okay, good, Annika. Thoughts may contradict as everyone has different beliefs. Okay, different thoughts. Bimakshi says maybe because we all have common ancestors who started the world, and they said might be the only thing people know, as no one knows. What is that? Well, I think that's certainly true. Bimakshi, I think that's certainly true. The idea that you know, people didn't know thousands of years ago what happened when we died, and interestingly, we're still kind of in the same situation, right? We still don't really know for sure, right? And of course, science can tell us that our bodies kind of stop operating, and you know, our bodies will start to decompose, but nobody really knows what happens to our consciousness or our soul or whatever, however you want to describe that kind of essence of us. Nobody's really figured out how to measure or understand it yet. And so, yeah, in some ways we're similar, we're just as in the dark as people hundreds of years ago, and therefore we kind of carry forth their explanation, right? I was raised in a Roman Catholic tradition, and that tradition says that you know, if you're good, you go to heaven, and if you're bad, you go to hell, right? And that kind of idea, that belief, is thousands of years old, right? Because we just kind of haven't figured out another explanation, right? So we've kind of carried forward this traditional explanation, right? Maya, the belief comes from certain cultures that has been around for many years. Definitely, right? Those ideas are passed forward for sure. Kamjot says every culture has different background and different mindset with different point of views. Yes, that's very true. It's very true. Although I'm trying to drill a little bit deeper than that, but you are right. Okay, so we're doing okay here. We're doing okay. This is a tricky question, because again, it almost kind of, in our imagination, we almost have to go to the beginning and kind of think about things in a very kind of general way, or a general sense. Probably a few of the major things that contribute to why people have different cultural views are the following, right? So I believe we flagged the environment as an important thing. Again, I mentioned that people live in all kinds of different physical environments, and those are going to have a different, those are going to have an effect on the way that you see the world, right? Living in a desert and living in the jungle are very, very different things, and you're going to see the world and kind of explain it differently, right? As a great example of this, just earlier today, maybe just an hour ago, I tried to explain human culture to you with the analogy of a computer, right? I said that human bodies or human brains are kind of like a computer, and culture is kind of like an operating system that gets downloaded to us. And you know, I'm hoping that you all kind of understood that analogy and that it made sense. Fingers are crossed. Hopefully you understood that. But of course, if I would have made that analogy 100 years ago, nobody nobody would have understood it, right? It wouldn't have made any sense at all. If I had talked to people 500 years ago about my computer analogy, they'd have no idea what I was talking about, right? And so the things that are part of our environment that we do understand can help us to understand the parts of our environment that we don't understand, right? So we all kind of get computers and how they work. We know what operating systems are and how they work. And so I used that, I took that understanding and I tried to apply it to humans and culture. And again, hopefully you understood that. But people 100 years ago don't know what a computer is. They don't know what an operating system is. It hasn't been invented yet. And so they would think about culture and how people are taught culture in a different way because they're living in a different environment, right? We're living in an environment with computers and phones everywhere. People 100 years ago weren't, right? So environment and what's around you, the things that you do understand can help you to understand the things that you don't. In a similar way, the way people acquire their food, that's an important piece of the puzzle as well. If you come from an agricultural community, for instance, often agricultural communities understand human reproduction in agricultural terms. Okay, so let me know if this sounds familiar to you. It may and it may not. Most of us have an agricultural background, either recently or a little bit in the past. But the fertility of a woman, she's often, women are often described as fertile, right? Just like soil, right? Soil is fertile. If a man has sex with her, he plants a seed, right? And a child grows from there, right? So sometimes around things like human reproduction, which people didn't fully understand, they used agriculture. They used farming, right? They understood farming and they took that and applied it to human reproduction, which they didn't quite understand. If there's any people in the audience here who are Christian, or if you know anything about Christianity, you'll know that in the Bible, Jesus is described as a shepherd, right? Jesus is a shepherd, and his followers, or the people of earth, or whoever, those people are his sheep, right? And he shepherds his sheep to safety, kind of thing. And similarly, sometimes Jesus himself is called the Lamb of God, right? So in this case, God is the shepherd, and Jesus is kind of the lamb that God is protecting, right? So you have these kind of analogies or comparisons to herding animals, to herding sheep. And that's not surprising really either, because during the time that Jesus was alive, in the part of the world in which he lived, there were lots of people making their living that way. They were herding sheep through the hills and through the mountains in in Palestine. And so people took that thing that they understood, herding of sheep, and they kind of used it to explain something else, right? And so you'll see this with environment, you'll see it with the way people get their food, and you'll see it in other ways too. People kind of take what they know and then use it to explain things that they don't understand, right? Sometimes historical events for a culture will influence the way that people understand things, right? Whether it's an environmental thing, an environmental disaster, or maybe it's the arrival of different people in their area that they now have to interact with. Different parts of culture can influence others, right? Like the environment or the way people get their food. Encountering other cultures can have an effect as well, right? If two cultures encounter each other and have to kind of live side by side and connect with each other, they will kind of rub off on each other, right? They will kind of absorb certain cultural ideas from the other culture, right? And it's interesting to think now, all of you are from another part of the world, you're from another culture, and it's kind of interesting to think about what aspects of maybe our culture, Canadian culture, are kind of influencing your ideas, right? But again, that's a kind of a natural thing to have happen. And so, yeah, people have different explanations for things and apply different meanings to cultural events because, yeah, sometimes they don't know and they don't understand, but they use what they do know, right? And that can be environmental, it can be subsistence based, how they get their food, it could be historical, it could be the influence of another culture. All of those things can be used to kind of map on and explain things that maybe people don't understand. Okay, so in order to better understand culture, there are 4 characteristics of culture which I would like us to understand. Okay, culture is symbolic, it's learned, it's integrated, and it's shared. And we've talked about a few of these kind of in passing, and I just want to kind of pull apart each one a little more so that we understand how this works. Okay, so yeah, so let's dive in here. The first one, culture is symbolic. And so you probably know that when you're talking about a symbol, you're talking about something that stands in for something else, right? This means that, right? Or this is representative of this thing, right? And anthropologists, of course, know that culture is hugely, hugely symbolic, okay? Cultures use symbols all the time to encode and to communicate meaning, okay? So, for instance, if I showed you all of these, most of you will probably recognize a number of these symbols, right? And so I think if you look there, some of you will see the Star of David, right, which is a symbol of Israel, but also of the Jewish people. Some of you will see the Om sign. Some of you will see the Nazi sign. Some of you will see the yin and the yang, which is associated with Taoism or Taoism. Some of you will see the crescent moon and the star, which is associated with Muslims and the Islamic faith. Some of you will see the wheel of Ashoka, which is on the modern flag of India. Some of you will see the symbol for Sikhs there. Some of you will see some more commercial ones, right? Like Target or Nike or Apple. So lots of different pictures, symbols that encode meaning, right? They encode meaning. I'd like to draw your attention to the Superman symbol there on the far left. Now, when we see that symbol, I think most of us kind of know what it is, right? We know that that's the symbol that the cartoon or movie character Superman has on his chest, right? But my question for you is, what other meanings are carried by that symbol? So in other words, what else do we think about or feel when we see that Superman symbol? What does it mean? Can you throw a few things in the live chat for me? What does that symbol mean? What does it make us think of? What meaning is encoded in that Superman symbol? So Sabrina here says, so strength and heroism, right? So we know the comic character of Superman, we know he's incredibly strong, right? But he's also heroic, right? He Um, yeah, he does heroic things, right? Kamjot says superpowers, right? The ability to do things that regular humans can't, right? That's good. Sukhjinder says, yeah, power. This is a symbol of power, right? Similar to what Sabrina said, a symbol of strength. Right? Lovepreet says here, a man having spiritual powers. Yeah, maybe not spiritual, but certainly powers beyond what regular humans have, right? Yeah, he's a superhero with superpowers, right? Um, I want to go back to the hero thing as well, because not only do we know that Superman has powers, right? He has strength and he can fly and he's, basically indestructible. But it's not just about what he is, but it's also about what he does, right? So we know that Superman, for instance, his activities in comics and movies are generally saving people, right? He's using his strength, he's using his powers to rescue people who are in trouble, to defend people who are being attacked, right? That's how he spends his time, right? So when we see a symbol like that, that's the thing about symbols and culture, right? Is that we immediately, even without really thinking about it, we can decode those symbols, right? We see the Superman symbol, we know that it represents the comic book character, but we know that it also represents all of these characteristics, right? Strength, power, heroism, protecting people, protecting those who can't protect themselves, rescuing people who are in trouble, right? There's a lot of kind of good meanings associated with that symbol, right? And similarly, if you look at the Nazi symbol, actually, I've been looking at that for a long time, but I don't think that's the Nazi symbol, because the Nazi symbol goes the other way, I think. Is it? Let me just look. Yeah, so I thought, so the Nazi symbol goes the other way. It's kind of the mirror flip of that. Does anyone know where that symbol comes from? It looks like a Nazi symbol, but it's not. The Nazi symbol is the reverse. Does anyone know where that comes from? I thought it came from early Brahmanism. I thought from kind of ancient India. I thought that's where that symbol originally came from. But I could be wrong. Don't quote me on that. Anyway, that's a tangent. So the Superman symbol, it transmits meaning to us, right? It doesn't just represent the character, it represents characteristics, right? Of goodness and protection and strength and heroism, right? And this is kind of how culture works, right? It works through communicating meaning through symbols, right? If you think about it, for the last, hour and a half or whatever it's been, we have been engaged in, there we go. Thank you, Kevin Preet. We have been engaged in symbolic communication, right? And I know that we wouldn't normally think of this, but I have been communicating to you in symbols for the past hour and a half, right? Every word I say is a symbol, right? So this is a cup right here. It's a teacup. And that sound that I just made, cup, is a symbol, right? That sound represents this thing. And so when I say it, you know what I mean, right? And so every word that comes out of my mouth is a symbol, right? I'm encoding meaning in my sounds, and you are sitting there decoding that meaning, right? All of our communication here is symbolic, right? And of course, if you think about it, humans communicate meaning through symbols like this, through sounds, through colors, through gestures, right? If I go like this, most of us know what that means, right? That means like, are you okay? Or I'm okay? Or everything is good, right? In some parts of the world, it actually means something pretty rude, but we don't need to go into that. In North America here, that's a symbol like, I'm okay, everything's fine, right? So humans are constantly communicating with each other in symbols, right? Facial expressions, sounds, gestures with our hands and with our bodies, written symbols like this, right? Or visual symbols. Culture is highly, highly symbolic. Now, to give you a little more of maybe an anthropological example, I'd like to direct your attention here to one particular culture. To look at this, it might seem like I just kind of mashed my hands on the keyboard, but I didn't. The group of people we're looking at here are called Kwakwaka'wakw, and they are a group of indigenous people. So they're some of the first people in North America here. They're an indigenous group from BC. Their traditional territory is just a little up the coast from Vancouver, a little bit to the north and on the tip of Vancouver Island. I think I have a map. Yes, I do. So you'll see the Kwakwaka'wakw people kind of in that green area toward the top of Vancouver Island. That's their traditional territory. That's where they and their ancestors have lived for thousands of years. While we're looking at this map, I just wanted to direct your attention to the fact that look how many different cultures there were in British Columbia, and this is before Europeans came. Look how many different cultures there were, right? There's probably, I don't know, 12 or 13, and each culture, each group has its own language, its own kind of religious practices, its own way of getting food, its own stories, its own technologies, right? So even in just this little part of British Columbia, there was a lot of cultural diversity before Europeans came. And the Kwakwaka'wakw, who I'm going to tell you about here, are really just one group of many that traditionally lived in BC, again, for thousands of years before people who looked like me got here. So, to give you a little bit of background here, again, the Kwakwaka'wakw are one of the first people. They're indigenous or aboriginal peoples here in BC. Traditionally, they used to live in kind of a bunch of different shelters, but maybe the most impressive ones are these big winter villages they used to live in. And so these are really big houses made of cedar wood. If you look in the photo there, you can see a guy standing on this sort of seawall that they built. So you can see these houses are quite big, and they've built stairs, and they have all kinds of boats and things. This picture is maybe a little easier to see what's going on. It's a museum exhibit. It's not real life, but it gives you some idea of how these people were living in these big villages next to the water. You can see some people in the foreground here, and one of them, I think, is preparing a salmon to cook. You can see a little baby kind of wrapped up there, and someone working on something. I can't really tell what that is. But yeah, really big, beautiful cedar houses. You can see they're painted on the front. You can see lots of totem poles standing in front of the houses, and you can see those types of totem poles around Vancouver and the Lower Mainland here. Now, I don't want to get too far into Kwakwaka'wakw culture, but I do want to draw your attention to one aspect of symbology here, and it has to do with something that an anthropologist would call a key metaphor. And I know we've only got a few minutes left here, so this is kind of the last thing I'll say, and then we'll pick this up on Tuesday, okay? So a key metaphor is a symbol within a culture, but it's a symbol that kind of dominates the meanings that people give to things. So it's kind of a general theme in which people kind of interpret their world or understand their world. And for the Kwakwaka'wakw people here, their key metaphor is hunger. Okay. Now, this will make more sense once I explain. If you look at some of the Kwakwaka'wakw artwork, you'll see things like this. Right? So these are all masks. They're made out of wood, and they're meant to be worn. So during Kwakwaka'wakw rituals, people would put on certain costumes, they'd put on the mask, and then they would act out or dance out stories. Right? And so if you look here in the mask right next to my head there on the top, I believe that's a wolf. If you go to the top left, you'll see kind of an eagle or kind of a thunderbird type thing. On the bottom left, you'll see a bear. And on the bottom right, you'll see a wild man. And so this is kind of a monster story of the Kwakwaka'wakw, these wild men that live in the woods and will eat you if you get lost and they catch you. But the idea here is that hunger is an important symbol for the Kwakwaka'wakw. And if you look at all of these different masks, saw them at the airport, yeah, cool. You'll see this type of artwork all over the place that comes up. If you look at these masks, you'll see there's a lot of emphasis on mouths and teeth, right? Most of these masks have big mouths, big teeth. They're kind of showing their teeth off, and that's kind of tied into that key metaphor of hunger. And of course, there's more to this, but we're just about to run out of time. And so maybe what I'll do is I'll press pause for a second, and I'll just ask, does anyone have any questions for me right now? Because I'm about to let you go and have your weekend as you desire. But I just wanted to check in and see if anyone had any questions. If you do have questions and you kind of don't get a chance to ask right now, you can always message me or email me and I can respond to you later. But I just thought I'd give you the question or the opportunity to ask a question right now if you wanted. Although I'm kind of imagining everyone will just want me to finish so they can go. So maybe that's what I'll do. So that is all I have for you. I hope everyone has a good weekend. I hope, I'll see you all on Tuesday. Please take care of yourselves. If you need to get vaccinated or if you need to get a booster, please try to do that. If you're out around other people, wear a mask, right? Protect yourself. Wear 2 masks if you want, especially if you're on the SkyTrain. It might be a good idea. Wash your hands. Take care of your health as best you can. And that's all I have for you. So have a nice weekend. Get lots of rest if you can. And I will see you all on Tuesday, okay? So that is it. I'll see you Tuesday, okay? Bye.